Good morning and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhaso, and this morning we'll be looking at another short sutta from the Buddha. This is from the Anguttara Nikaya. And then I'll give some explanations of this discourse, and then I'll take any questions at the end. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So this is Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 11, sutta number 11, Patama Mahanama Sutta. So the first discourse to Mahanama. So Mahanama was a lay follower of the Buddha who appears in several discourses. He's mentioned in several places in the suttas. So on this particular occasion, I'll go ahead and start reading through the sutta and then give some explanations. So the sutta begins. One time the Buddha was staying in the land of the Sakyans near Kaplavatu in the Banyan Tree Monastery. So the Sakyans were the Buddha's own clan, his own extended family. And it says, at that time, several monks were making a robe for the Buddha, thinking that when his robe was finished and the 3 months of the rains residence, the Vasa, had passed, the Buddha would set out wandering. Mahanama the Sakyan heard about this. He went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, Bhante, I have heard that several monks are making a robe for the Buddha, thinking that when his robe is finished and the 3 months of the Vasa has passed, the Buddha will set out wandering. Now we spend our life in various ways. Which of these should we practice? So in other words, the Buddha was staying for the Vasa, for the 3-month summer retreat in the area of the Sakyans, which meant that the lay people of the Sakyan clan were able to come and receive Dhamma teachings. But now that the Buddha is about to leave, Mahanama is coming to ask for advice. Like, how should we continue our Dhamma practice while the Buddha is away? So while we don't have access to the teacher, how should we continue to practice? So that's why he's coming to ask, because the Buddha is about to leave. And the Buddha replies, Sadhu, sadhu, Mahanama. It is appropriate that gentlemen such as you come to me and ask. We spend our life in various ways. Which of these should we practice? And the Buddha says, the faithful succeed, not the faithless. The energetic succeed, not the lazy. The mindful succeed, not the unmindful. Those with samadhi succeed, not those without samadhi. The wise succeed, not those without wisdom. And he says, when you're grounded in these 5 things, go on to develop 6 further things. But first, I'll just briefly speak about these 5 things. So these are 5 qualities that he's saying that these lay people should develop. So the Sakyan lay people should develop. So first off is faith, saddha. So saddha is particularly a faith that the Buddha was awakened. So confidence in the awakening of the Buddha, confidence that the Buddha was a person of perfect wisdom, perfect compassion, perfect understanding of the path to awakening, and that he taught that path for the rest of us. Then next one is virya, energy or heroic effort. So the Buddha is saying here that success is for those who apply energy, not for those who are lazy. So it's particularly energy for the overcoming of unwholesome states of mind and for the cultivation of wholesome states of mind. Next, those who have established mindfulness, upattita sati means established mindfulness. Not those who are of muddle-mindedness. So mutta sati means muddled mindfulness, blurry mindfulness. So this means that we need to have a sharp, clear awareness at all times. So not letting the mind get blurry or fuzzy or hazy. Next he says, samahito aradiko hoti. So those who have samadhi succeed, and not those who don't have samadhi. So as we read through the suttas, we find that the Buddha placed a tremendous importance on samadhi as a necessary component for a successful practice. I actually find it really strange that in recent times there's emerged non-samadhi or anti-samadhi strains of Buddhist meditation tradition, because it's so clearly in opposition to the Buddha's instructions, where the Buddha put such heavy emphasis on the importance of samadhi. So here's one more case. He says, those with samadhi succeed, and not those without samadhi. And then finally, those with wisdom, not those with weak wisdom. So again, samadhi is the unification and stillness and focus of mind that comes through dedicated meditation practice. And wisdom is usually defined elsewhere in the suttas as the wisdom which directly observes arising and falling. In other words, the wisdom which knows the impermanence of all things, which knows the temporary, ephemeral, insubstantial nature of all things. Again, confidence in the Buddha, energetic commitment to relinquishing one's unwholesome mind states and cultivating wholesome mind states, constant, sharp, clear awareness, constant mindfulness, samadhi, so the cultivation of mental stillness and unification during meditation practice, and the wisdom which directly knows impermanence. So these are the first 5 qualities that the Buddha lists here. And he says, Mahanama, when you're grounded in these 5 things, go on to develop 6 further things. And here the Buddha gives the first 6 of the 10 recollections. He says, first, you should recollect the Buddha, the Tathagata. It says, the Blessed One is perfected, an arhat, a fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of the world, supreme teacher of those who wish to be trained, teacher of gods and humans, awakened and blessed. So recollecting the qualities of the Buddha. And he says, Mahanama, when a disciple of the noble ones recollects the Buddha, their mind is not full of greed, hatred, and delusion. At that time, their mind is unswerving, based on the Buddha. A disciple of the noble whose mind is unswerving finds inspiration in the meaning and the teaching, and finds joy connected with the teaching. When they're joyful, euphoria arises. When the mind is full of euphoria, the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, they feel bliss. And when they're blissful, the mind enters samadhi. The mind easily enters samadhi. And he says, this is called the disciple of the noble who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, and lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching based on the recollection of the Buddha. So here the Buddha is talking about how, first off, with the basis of the 5 qualities I already mentioned, so faith, energy, mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom, then one recollects the Buddha, focuses one's mind on the recollection of the Buddha. And when one does that, then it brings up joy. And that joy then becomes the basis for serenity and for concentration, samadhi. And this allows one, the Buddha says, to live balanced among people who are unbalanced, untroubled among people who are troubled. So again, this is advice he's giving to lay people. And lay people often have to interact with not the most balanced people, not the most serene people. So this is a way he's saying that you can maintain your own balance and stability when dealing with people who are unbalanced and unstable. So cultivating those 5 qualities, recollecting the Buddha, and building up that joy, tranquility, and concentration based upon recollection of the Buddha. And then the next one is a recollection of the Dhamma. So he says you should recollect the Dhamma. The Dhamma is well explained by the Buddha, apparent in the present life, immediately effective, inviting inspection, relevant, so that sensible people can know it for themselves. And as before, he says, when one recollects the Dhamma, the mind is not full of greed, hatred, and delusion. And he goes through the list as before. And he says, this is called the disciple of the noble, who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced and lives untroubled among people who are troubled. So here's a similar concept. So one is focusing on recollection of the Dhamma, the good qualities of the Dhamma, as a way of bringing up joy and serenity and helping the mind to enter into samadhi, so that one can maintain balance and stability amidst those who are unbalanced and unstable. Next is recollection of the Sangha. So then the Buddha says to recollect the Sangha. And again, we see the standard recollection that we commonly chant in Buddhist monasteries. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho, etc. It says, the Sangha of the Buddhist disciples is practicing the way that's good, direct, systematic, and proper. It consists of the 4 pairs, the 8 individuals. That's talking about the 4 stages of awakening. It says, this is the Sangha of the Buddhist disciples that is worthy of offerings, worthy of hospitality, worthy of donations, worthy of respect, and is the supreme field of merit for the world. So here it's pointing to the fact that, as is mentioned elsewhere in the suttas, the best place to make offerings is to dedicated spiritual practitioners, and particularly to monastics who are aiming towards awakening. This is where one generates the most good karma from offerings. And so the Buddha says, when a noble disciple or disciple of the noble recollects the Sangha, and as before, it's a way of preparing the mind to enter into samadhi, and therefore to live balanced among the unbalanced and so on. Next, the next recollection is a disciple of the noble recollects their own morality, which is unbroken, impeccable, spotless, and undamaged, liberating, praised by the wise, not mistaken, and leading to samadhi. So the next one here is to recollect one's own virtue, one's own morality, one's own sila. So through focusing on one's own goodness, a memory of one's own wholesome qualities, one's own commitment to doing what is good and right. And what that does is that brings up, once again, a lot of joy in the mind, joy connected with awareness of one's own goodness, and also serenity. When we're focusing on our own goodness, then we don't need to fear the future, because we know that we're building up good karma, which means we will experience good effects in the future. And so with that joy and serenity, then the mind can more easily enter samadhi, and also more easily navigate the troubles and difficulties of lay life. Next one, he says, you should recollect your own generosity. So recollecting, I am so fortunate, so very fortunate. Among people with hearts full of the stain of stinginess, I live free of stinginess, generous, open-handed, loving to let go, committed to charity, loving to give and to share. So with this one is recollecting one's own generosity. So the Buddha here is encouraging one to think of how, even though I'm surrounded by stingy people, I am not stingy. Instead, I am generous and open-handed. I love to let go. I love to help others, to share what I have with others. So when we recollect our own generosity, then again, the mind becomes joyful and serene, and it's easier to enter samadhi. And then the final one that he mentions here is recollection of the devas. So recollecting the higher realms and the happy beings that live in the higher realms. And he gives the list of various heaven realms. So remembering there are the devas of the 4 great kings, the devas of the 33, the Yama devas, the contented devas, the devas who love to create, the devas who control the creations of others, the devas of Brahma's host, and devas even higher than those. So remembering the various planes of joyful existence higher than the human realm. And one thinks, when those devas passed away from here, they were reborn there. In other words, they used to be human, but now they're devas. They were reborn there because of their faith, morality, learning, generosity, and wisdom. I too have the same kind of faith, morality, learning, generosity, and wisdom. So this is a way of recollecting one's own capacity to be reborn in the heaven realms. So it's recognizing that we've built up the necessary conditions in order to be reborn as a deva, in order to be reborn as one of these bright, joyful spirits in the higher realms. So we have nothing to fear from death, and we also have nothing to fear from life, because we know that we've cultivated sufficient good karma to be born as a deva if we don't attain awakening in this life. And again, the Buddha says that with that focus of mind, then the mind is free of greed, hatred, and delusion. One experiences joy and serenity and can more easily enter samadhi. And so once again, this is a way that one can live balanced among the unbalanced, stable amongst the unstable, and so on. So based on recollection of the devas. So that's the end of the Buddha's advice to Mahanama. So the 5 qualities of mind to cultivate, and then the 6 recollections based on that. And then this allows the mind to more easily enter samadhi and to maintain one's internal balance as one goes throughout the world. So at this time we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So hello to the people following online. So hello to Richard, Rebecca, Kit, John, Vivian, Vivek, Sood, Raquel, Marielle, Jim, Tora, Siyong, Zerus, Rebecca, and Aparna. Good to see all of you. And I see one question here. So Rebecca asks, did the anti-samadhi strains of Buddhism originate in the US? Are they becoming popular? Actually, it started in Burma, interestingly enough. It started in Burma a little over 100 years ago. And it's, actually, if we want to speak properly, it actually started much longer ago than that. The origins of it come from the commentarial notions of dry insight, which is not something that we find mentioned anywhere in the suttas. The first record of this concept is 1,000 years after the Buddha, the idea that it's possible to attain awakening without developing samadhi. This first arose 1,000 years after the Buddha, but it didn't have much traction at the time. Where it really developed into something was about a little over 100 years ago in Burma, where there started to be developed meditation methods which were exclusively focused on insight practice without the development of samadhi. So it's actually a relatively recent thing, again, emerged from Burma. It did have a big effect in the US because a lot of the meditation practice in the US is based upon these Burmese meditation methods, which have an anti-samadhi angle to them. So they're relatively popular, but there's still plenty of people who respect samadhi and value samadhi. So there's, it's as popular as anything, I suppose, and it's better to do some kind of meditation than not to meditate at all. But if one wants to attain success in the Buddha's teachings, it's important to note that the Buddha did heavily emphasize the value of samadhi. And Rebecca also asks, for those of us who didn't grow up in a Buddhist household or culture, that would include me, how can we strengthen a more personal connection to the Buddha to develop faith? Well, one thing that helps tremendously is to read the suttas. Read all the suttas cover to cover. For me, that was incredibly powerful in strengthening faith. Reading through the suttas, you really get a sense of the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha. So I found that very, very powerful in my own mind. Also useful is things like bowing to Buddha images, chanting. These are things which help quite a bit. But the really big one for me was reading the suttas. Really helped me to have faith in the Buddha. And Bhavani says, please excuse my ignorance. Won't you get bored, Bhante? I never get bored. Like, even just sitting by myself in my room for hours, I don't get bored. I don't remember the last time I was bored, actually. I don't think I've been bored for years. Yeah, I don't know. No, when your practice is developed, you don't get bored anymore. It's one of the little positive side effects. Yeah. And Sud asks, the Buddha did not mention metta or dwelling in metta here. Is there a reason why? Is it just implied without saying that one should also dwell in metta along with developing these factors? Well, I mean, the Buddha, he can't say everything every time. So that's true. He didn't say metta here, because if he did say metta, then the sutta would get longer and longer and longer, and there'd be more and more things included. So probably Mahanama didn't need to hear about metta on this occasion. Maybe Mahanama already had a very good metta practice, so the Buddha didn't feel a need to mention that. Or maybe the Buddha just wanted to emphasize other qualities. So the Buddha had many different lists, and some of them included metta and some of them didn't. So sometimes the Buddha would talk about something that was more centered on metta, and sometimes he would talk about something else. In the sutta, the focus is more on cultivating the basis for samadhi. And the Buddha is emphasizing how developing samadhi is a support to one's daily life. So remaining stable among the unstable. So that's more the focus here rather than on cultivating metta. But yeah, of course, you should definitely dwell in metta along with these other factors. And Norma says, please donate for Italian project. Great Dhamma here. Thanks for the word of support, Norma. So yes, we are trying to open a forest monastery in southern Italy, so your help would be appreciated. I think there's a link to the page on that. If not, I'll put in the link. And let's see here. Didi says, what is Sankara? This is a bit off topic. It's a great question, but it's off topic. So Didi, if you could bring this question to Monk Chat tomorrow evening, then I'll give a full answer there. And Johanna says, practicing sense restraint and celibacy seems to make me more sensitive at times. So also a good question, but also off topic. So not really related to the sutta here. So Johannes, if you could bring this question to Monk Chat tomorrow evening as well. It sounds like we're already shaping up to have a good Monk Chat tomorrow. And Scott asks, as the practice progresses, the reflection of the level of responsibility we have as practitioners becomes apparent. This can give rise to fear, especially in one with significantly unwholesome, and it cuts off there. I think there's more to the question. Unwholesome karma, maybe? So this is why the Buddha is emphasizing to recollect your own goodness. So recollecting your own morality and generosity. And that helps to build up a sense of joy, a sense of happiness connected with knowledge of one's own goodness. And then there's no fear, because you recognize that since you've been cultivating good karma, you have nothing to fear. And actually, if you try to recollect your own morality and generosity and you don't have anything to recollect, well, that's a problem. That means you need to work on your morality and your generosity. If you're keeping good morality and good generosity, then you'll have something to focus your mind on. And as you focus your mind on your morality and generosity, then your fear will melt away. There's nothing to fear. So that's what I would really emphasize here, because that's what we see in the sutta. Recollection of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, of your morality, of your generosity, and of the fact that you've cultivated the conditions to be reborn as a deva. That's what the Buddha is emphasizing here. And yeah, absolutely, that will help to prevent the arising of fear. And Sud asks, is it possible to develop samadhi with practicing meditation for 1.5 hours per day? It is possible. So a lot of it depends upon what you're doing the rest of the time. So samadhi mostly depends upon what you're doing with the rest of your life. So if you're spending your day listening to heavy metal music and arguing with people and yelling at your neighbor or whatever, then when you go and try to do meditation, it's going to be really difficult. But if you spend your day in a quiet, peaceful way with mindfulness and equanimity, then when you go to do meditation, then you can get very strong results, even in a short period of time. So most of your samadhi is actually developed outside of meditation practice. Through the conditions that you build in your life. And Didi says, how does one overcome drowsiness or sleepiness during meditation? A little bit off topic. So Didi, again, I think better to bring this to monk chat. So not quite on the topic of the meditation here. Johannes says, can't come to monk chat due to time zones. Can one submit questions beforehand? Yes, you should be able to log into the monk chat and post questions before the stream even starts. And then I'll see them first thing when I start the monk chat. And that's the last question. You have a question? Go ahead.
How can one recollect the Buddha Dhamma?
Well, he gives the example there of going through the qualities of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, Itipiso, Bhagava, Arahang, etc. So going through the qualities of each one, and recollecting the qualities of the Buddha. Well, first off, recollecting the fact that the Buddha existed in the first place. But then going through the list, it's like, oh, the Buddha was an arhat. What does that mean? He was a sammasambuddha. What does that mean? Etc. So going through each quality and considering what it means and what a blessing it is to have had such a being in the world. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I read in another sutta where it says, when one has unwavering, unshakable confidence in the Buddha, then that's one is a stream enterer. And I was, I don't know if that would be pertinent to this sutta, but
not really. Okay. So that's talking about irreversible faith, which again, as you mentioned, is a quality of a stream enterer. But that's not what the Buddha is talking about in this discourse. A couple more questions here. So Guy says, as a layperson, what is your recommendation starting a meditation practice? Off topic. So Guy, please bring that to monk chat tomorrow evening. Yeah. You have another question?
Mm-hmm. So I noticed the title of this live stream was Advice to Lay People.
Yeah.
So in the sutras, it doesn't really...
He's talking to a layperson.
Really?
Yeah, Mahanama is a layperson.
And this is not an occasion, like he was talking about bhikkhus and like making
So the reason why I mentioned the bhikkhus making a robe for the Buddha was because that was why Mahanama came. It's because he was like, oh, they're making a robe for the Buddha, and then when they're done, they're going to leave. So Mahanama was like, oh, this is my last chance to go and ask the Buddha questions. This is my last chance to ask advice, because the Buddha's about to leave.
Because he was on the rains retreat.
Yeah.
Rains, okay.
So he's like, so he hears like the monks are making a robe for the Buddha because the Buddha is going to leave as soon as Vasa ends. So Mahanama went to ask questions of the Buddha because this was his last chance before the Buddha left. So he wanted to get advice for how to continue his practice as a lay person when the Buddha was away. Okay?
That makes sense.
But everything the Buddha says in here it's directed to lay people.
Oh, okay, lay people. Well, monks can practice this too.
Yeah, of course. All of this is also relevant to monks. Yeah. But it's interesting because it is a clear proof that the Buddha also encouraged lay people to develop samadhi. Okay, so it looks like that's it for now. So we'll go ahead and conclude the session with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.